Hey everyone, Brandflex here, back with the fourth video for the set teasers. Today's will be even shorter because I feel like they're decreasing the amounts more and more as we go along. So hopefully this video might not have been across 10 minutes. But going right into it, we have the first card revealed once again the day of the third day. But just how it is. We have Cassius, who's going to be the 5 mana 3/2 gold Portalcraft follower. Fanfare, select an artifact follower in your hand and deal X to all enemy followers. X is equal to the selected follower's attack. And then last words is put a fortifier artifact in your hand. Now, this card is really good on paper, but the issue is that this card is directly scaled to how powerful Artifact Portal is as an archetype. And I think, unfortunately, while Cassius is really powerful, like it he single-handedly can stall out the mid game multiple times because he can just deal 5 damage over and over again because you can just make a striker artifact, which is the 5 mana card. So if we go in here, let me just pull it up really quickly if I can find the 1 mana cost for you guys. But the main thing is that you have to remember that the issue with Artifact Portal isn't necessarily its early game or mid game. The issue with Artifact Portal is that it simply does not win the game fast enough to beat out one-shot kill turns or sustain itself against stuff like Havencraft. So what ends up happening is that you are going to be 20 HP for the most part. You're going to be pinging your opponent down to like 10 or 11 HP. But then the moment that turn 7, 8, 9 hits, your opponent with these really meta decks, at least from set 3, will just heal a 20, which prevents you from killing them with Omega, or they'll just kill you outright when it comes to the case of Runecraft. So this card is really, really good on paper, but the issue that I have is that he simply doesn't solve Portal's biggest weakness, which is just winning. Now, there is a thing with Cassius where his last words does give you 2 artifact pieces by giving you a fortifier artifact outright. And so my question is, does Cassius give Artifact Portal this gear breakpoint where you simply have enough gears generated from over or across the game to just play double Omega from turn 10 and 11? Because if Artifact Portal can just play Omega into Omega 2 turns in a row, that might actually be enough in order to give Artifact Portal some actual legs in the next set. Because even though they'll still lose to like a Runecraft Portal playing the Cositis Decline combo and other things, the main thing is that Omega does block certain aspects of Cositis Decline, or even just Decline in general, because you don't always get Cositis Decline specifically. Sometimes you are playing like Kuon into Decline, and Omega, being such a large minion with Aura, can prevent the Rune player from killing past the Omega minion, like with a taunt and Aura. So there are certain things that will be fine, in my opinion, with Cassius if you can get into the double Omega phase. But again, the question is, can you play double Omega, or will you be locked behind 1 Omega by turn 11? Because if so, I think Cassius will be really strong for Portal Artifact, but won't be good enough because Artifact Portal doesn't have good enough win cons or payoffs later on. Going into the cards revealed in the night, we have Show, the Reborn Night King, a 3 mana 2/1 bronze Portcraft follower. Fanfare if you've unlocked Super Evolution, so once again, turn 6 if you're going second, or turn 7 if you're going first. Gain Barrier, and also you have Storm. So I was watching Nero's stream on this, like right before I made this video, and he made a really good point that this is essentially a version of Awar. Not Awar, my bad. It's whoever the Storm minion is from Dragon. So this Storm Dragon minion is also not played at all. Afa, that's why I thought it was Awar. Afa Windrider. So when you're in Overflow, gets this follower Intimidate. Obviously, Intimidate can sort of function similarly to Barrier because it requires a bit more in order to clear for the most part, and also comes with baseline Storm. The main thing with Portal is that I think Portal does actually have better aggro potential compared to Dragon, because a lot of Dragon's aggro potential is locked behind cards that only deal face damage. So for example, Forte really only deals face damage. But with Portal, if you're playing the hybrid aggro lists, what you have is that you have much better early game because Dragon has pretty bad early game, even when you're playing, more aggressive list. But Portal has stuff like Puppeteer, so you can play Coin Puppeteer into Show to deal a lot of damage. You can then play stuff like Outlet to play Beta. And obviously, Beta, unlike Forte, like obviously Forte does a bit more damage going straight to face, and Beta only does 3, but Beta is technically a wider, or Outlet is technically a wider body, so it requires, once again, a bit more to clear. Obviously, Forte has Intimidate, so it's again like a different version of a bit more effort to clear. but you can obviously get more value from beta across time, and obviously beta does bypass wards, whereas Forte doesn't. So there's another point where with Show and Portal specifically, you can actually play Show Super Evo on like turn 7, and then play your Puppet Cats to prep the Orcus on the next turn, so that instead of having to play a turn 9 12 damage Orcus, you're playing a turn 8 12 damage Orcus because you've Super Evo'd Show on turn 7 on curve, and then you dealt the 5 damage with Show because obviously he's Storm, and then obviously as again with that idea, like you do have, since he's the 3 mana cost minion and Puppet Cat is a 1/1, you have 3 extra mana to deal with an enemy ward card that might be there to block you. And then once again, obviously by that point you have barrier, so Show will be a bit more effort to clear, and if your opponent has to spend a little bit more effort to clear a card, that means that they'll have less ways to heal out of your Orcus range. So going into Show into Orcus will be 5 plus 12, which is 17. Obviously not quite enough to kill, but if you're playing Show earlier, or if you're playing more, if you're playing like more tempo early on, the odds that you deal that 3 damage earlier is pretty likely, especially if you're playing that hybrid aggro list that Portal has gotten popular with. And obviously, going into further in the game, you can just play Liam as the finisher for the turn 9, or even just a second Orcus with like a little bit of scuffed like puppet storms, because obviously you use the other Super Evo on Show. So all in all, a pretty decent card for more aggressive puppet lists, or more aggressive portal lists, which seems like the route that craft is being taken down. So not bad support, but obviously not that insane, because we already had Dogs 1 to be like the pseudo storm value. But obviously Show is more universally applicable for 1 less attack. Next, we have Eustace, who is going to be another Forestcraft follower. He's going to be a 5 mana, 5/4 silver, fanfare, Skybound art. Select another allied unevolved follower on the field, and then evolve that and this follower, and then Clash is deal 3 to the opposing followers. So, mostly a takes 2 card, not really that good. I think we don't have many forms of, we don't have any examples of a really strong Skybound art minion besides Sandalphon, which is a neutral card. And so I guess Eustace is probably going to be a take 2 filler card. Clash deal 3 to the opposing follower, I believe, is something that happens after the initial attack. So Eustace would be something, I honestly think that's how it works, right? So, and obviously Eustace, it works on a follower attacking into him. So he does deal technically 10 damage, which is not bad for like dealing with bigger threats, but obviously dealing with board threats is not good enough anymore in these current iterations of Shadowverse. So we have to see if the final Portalcraft Evo, or if the final Portalcraft Legendary is some sort of like super Skybound art or Skybound art payoff to really make Eustace decent, because otherwise he's just okay. And also like he's 5 mana, so you could maybe combo him with something like the card we just went over that I already forgot the name of, Show. So at 8 mana, you could maybe combo Eustace and Show together to get a bit more free damage from Show, but it's not that great. But we'll see. He is like a card with some potential, but he's very basic in that potential. So we'll see if he actually ends up being powerful. And the final card we have is going to be the new Forest Legendary, 5 mana, 4/3, Yule and Societet, Harmonious Dancers. This is the last legendary game for Forest, so we have Awar and Yule and Societet. Society? I can't pronounce that name. Y and S. So fanfare, deal 4 damage to a random enemy follower on the field, and then do this twice. So you're gonna deal 4 damage or 8 damage overall to enemy board, twice. And then you're gonna Super Evo, gain the crest, Yule and Society. Probably not correct pronunciation. Harmonious Dancers, and the crest is going to be countdown 4 once per turn. Whenever you play a follower, evolve it. And so if you can't play a minion on the first turn, this is realistically 3 extra Evos that you're going to get with UL and Societ. But if you can play like a 1 or 2 mana cost on curve with this card, you can also cheat out the 4th Evo with her. And so I guess most importantly, we should probably look at how good the potential is really quickly from Forest. Sadly, Forest doesn't have any really good followers to Evo. The only really good one they could debatably argue is like just really powerful is going to be Congregate of Unkilling. And so obviously Super Evo unlocks on turn 6 or 7. So you are able to play Congregate of Unkilling on curve with this crest buff. And then if this works the way that most people think it does, where the crest activates first and then Congregate of Unkilling activates, you get 5 Evos. So this card into Congregate of Unkilling will basically solo proc Sandalphon's invoke mechanic. Obviously, you'll proc it way before, but you can see a world where Forest will invoke Sandalphon, and then they'll play Yule Society at some point, and then and then they'll invoke Sandalphon at some point during that time. But the main thing is that you have to invoke Sandalphon before you play Conquer of Killing, because Sandalphon goes to the board and then bounces to your hand, and Conquer of Killing is obviously a board filling card. So if you manage to get Sandalphon into your hand before Conquer of Killing is played, that is -5 to his Super Skybound Art meter, and that means you'll always be able to play Sandalphon on the turn after to play the his Battle Cry, which is deal 10 or deal 2 5 times the enemy or enemy board randomly. So there are potentials that Forest can play a more tempo focused game plan with both Yule and Society and then Kungerman Killing and Sandalphon in the game, which is obviously the intention because we have Kupitan, and Kupitan obviously works very well with Yule and Society because once again, like if you have Kupitan held from earlier on, you can play like if you have a good Fairy of the Pond or just a Fairy in hand, you can probably farm Kupitan's Skybound art even later in the game because by the time like let's say that you draw Kupitan right after you play Yule Society, you'll have one Evo. It'll probably be 7 or 8 mana, so you need to Evo twice because of how Skybound art works. So you're gonna be on turn 7 or 8, and that means that you only have 7 or 8 charge, so you need the next 2 charge. So you could play like if you're going first, that means you can draw Kupitan, play one card, Evo another card manually, and then play Kupitan herself, which would then give you the which would then trigger her own evolution, and then also her effects. So let me just search Kupitan really quickly to see if I can show you guys the card while I'm talking about this. That is, yep, that is this card. You guys can probably see that. Oopsies. All right, whatever. I'll just scroll up. Of course, the last mention of Kupitan in comments was about her Kupitans. That's really funny. But in case you've forgotten what Kupitan does, let's find her again real quick. Yeah, so she's a gold card that you can't see because I have the game in the way. And yeah, so she's super Skybound art, so you can't do the thing I talked about. So yeah, maybe it's a little worse than I expected. But at the very least, after you play Yulon Society, you get the board clear, so you are basically guaranteed to have perma board clear going forward. And again, that's not good enough in this current iteration of Shadowverse. However, once again, to bring it up, you are charging your Sandalphon, and Sandalphon is probably going to be the generic tempo, like mid-range win condition for all decks. I am pretty confident in calling out Sandalphon being like a must craft if you're not playing an OTK combo deck, just because he does so much damage for free. Like, he is super Skybound art, to be fair, but he will drag himself to your hand, and 10 damage is a lot of damage for anyone to take. So if you're playing mid-range or you're playing tempo, you will probably deal some face damage, hopefully. But obviously, like, we know what Cresthaven does, we know what Rune does, like, there will be a lot of healing, so you do need a little bit more extra with Sandalphon in order for him to be really that powerful. But we'll see how the meta shakes out. I think Yulon Society isn't that great for meta. Like, I think Roach will just be better in general, but obviously with Kupitan, we have some potential. With Conquer and Killing, we have some potential. And that is, and it's not even to mention that, like, Roach, or Force rather, does have some decent cards that you could be happy with evoing. Like Cynthia, you want to manually evo, but playing Cynthia herself with the Yulon Society buffs wouldn't be that bad because you still get a 6/5 with 2/1/1s to trade. And obviously, like, we do have stuff like we just have like generic minions that are also decent, just like buff and run into face. I think probably the funniest one or the most reliable combo you have with Yulon Society is gonna be Fairy Fencer, ironically, because Fairy Fencer, when you super evo Yulon Society, will be reduced to 1 mana, so you're almost guaranteed. Like, if you have Fairy Fencer in hand, that means even going first, or rather going second, you have a 1 mana play to immediately evo and buff with. So there is barely some sauce with just generic force cards. Neutrals, once again, like, the only neutral that really does anything with this is going to be Hinikar and Jafnar, which isn't a good card, so I doubt he's gonna see play even with Yulon Society at Crest and Forest, but we'll see. There are things to be done. There are more cards to be released, so we'll and I feel like with Kubiton and Yul Sayet being in Forestcraft, I believe that the bronze and silver cards will probably be more like whenever evolves do this instead of evo this manually to do this. So we'll see. Thanks for watching. Obviously, we'll be back for the 5th round of teasers tomorrow, and hopefully they continue being spicy because for every craft but Dragoncraft, there have been some pretty good, interesting, like actual deck defining builds that are dropping. So yeah, see you guys next time. Bye bye.